Greetings, everyone. This is Rock and Roll Spot Connection with the weekly comic book roundup. And yes, we are the day late this week due to my work schedule. More on that at the end of the video. Anyway, today right now we'll be looking at this week's X-Men books as well as our miscellaneous Marvel book for the week. Kicking things off with Hellions, number 4. Where we left off in Hellions, the Hellions were all but beaten by Madeline Pryor and the clone Marauders. Alex Havoc was once again under her thrall. The only ones free seemed to be Psylocke and Wildchild. So, we begin with Madeline and Alex. Madeline talking to Alex, telling him that about what Sinister did in his cloning lab, and how she can hear the demons. That she can hear demons and old friends that come to talk. She refers to as old friends that come to talk to her, claiming that they gather to watch her and Alex's love bleed. Meanwhile, Grey Crow is Grey Crow's being nommed on by Arclight, while Harpoon and Blockbuster try to get into Nanny and Riptide. Seems they finally managed to get in. However, before they can truly start chowing down on Nanny, Wildchild and Psylocke show up. Saving her and freeing, tossing a one of harpoons to Grey Crow, who then uses it to free himself. And Arclight has a moment of clarity when she realizes just what Madeline is doing. She's waking, as stated previously, she's waking the entire Marauder clone farm. Arclight's now in control of herself and tells Grey Crow that she's back. And since Madeline's spread thin, no. So Grey Crow gives Psylocke instructions on where to go, and he's explaining that the Marauders are his people, and he's the one who's going to bring them down and bring them home. He owes them that. And, he executes them. He kills, just goes through headshot after headshot of the Marauders, starting with Arclight. However, it turns out that Grey Crow's directions did not lead to where he told Psylocke and company they would, but rather to what's best described as waste processing, which includes the corpses of various mutants that were discarded by Sinister, much to Nanny's dismay. Back with Alex and Madeline, things are proceeding according to Madeline's plan. She asked if she lost her hold on him, and claiming that one night was all of her was all he needed, all it took to rend his sanity to wet threads. And he kind of chuckles and says, sure, if that makes you feel better. And she realizes that something really messed him up, and starts to ask what happened when Grey Crow shows up and puts a bullet through her chest. Before she dies, she fixes Alex's mouth so that it's no longer a case of it had been made to vanish, and then he cut it open, but like a normal mouth. And she asks him, as she dies, she asks him to remember her. So I guess she only wanted them to know that she was a real girl. And, yeah. Most of the Hellions managed to make it out as the Essex State Home for Foundlings crumbles to the ground as havoc lets loose. Wildchild opines that the council was right. They really are a bunch of sons of bitches, and starts laughing. With Grey Crow joining in, and then Alex joining in. And Orphan Maker joining in until he's told to stop by Nanny. We then get a post-mission report. We're a week past the Hellions' return from Nebraska, I thought it beneficial to bring you up to speed on the state of our problem children, and in doing so, elucidate any benefits they've received from their mission. Havoc remains of utmost concern. By all accounts, he experienced a prolonged episode of dissociation in which the demons that haunt him were very much behind the wheel. Emma provided post-event psych-care and reported sporadic memory loss and a slight detachment from reality. Specifically, Alex remembers Madeline Pryor being shot but does not remember or seem not interested in who shot her. Emma seems hesitant to prod further, citing a lingering guilt from the bang-up job she did fixing Alex last time. I have no reason to doubt her intentions. Yet. Last time being when she made him evil during Axis. A weight has been lifted from John Grey Crow, even as he worries over the resurrection of his former teammates. He very much agrees they should be returned with as few of Mr. Sinister's genetic modifications as feasible, but aside from that, refuses to help them assimilate. He feels it's better for everyone if they go their separate ways. Empath was killed in action. Only wry smiles offered his explanation. This was expected and within tolerance. Wildchild has calmed down considerably, only showing aggression when he perceives a threat to Psylocke, whom he slavishly follows. Psylocke, to her credit, has taken a grin and bear it approach. Well, you'd be hard-pressed to find the grin, but you understand. Nanny appears to have brought a trauma home with her, related to seeing the misdeeds of Mr. Sinister's past up close. She had to be reminded to feed Peter yesterday, unthinkable in the weeks prior. Emma assures me that any emotion Nanny lets herself feel is progress and essential to her healing. So how do we do in hitting our mission parameters? Therapeutic value. On a whole, there seems to have been some cathartic value to the mission. Empath notwithstanding, but we knew we'd be taking mulligans on him. Violent expression. The team was able to let loose effectively, as evidenced by the decimated orphanage left in their wake. Human casualties. Aside from the corrupted marauders, Madeline Pryor was felt as a combatant. This subject is a sensitive one, as you can imagine. It's agreed she wasn't human, so now the council must decide if she will be considered a clone of Jean or a mutant in her own right. A philosophical debate with Madeline's resurrection hanging in the balance. We cut to later on one of the beaches. Grey Crow's cleaning one of his weapons and Psylocke and Wildchild come up. Psylocke informing Grey Crow that the Marauders have been approved for resurrection, but also adding that it won't be quick, but it will happen. Grey Crow explains that that's not his business, and he appreciates Psylocke letting him do what he was going to do, though she explains that he misunderstands her duties. That Krakoa doesn't ask him to not deny his nature, with Wildchild adding the dog will hunt. And then Psylocke further adding that they must rest peace wherever they find it, before the trio all just sit on the beach as the sun sets. Back on Bar Sinister, Alex and Scott are talking about the philosophical debate of whether or not to resurrect Madeline. Apparently, the conclusion has been that no, they're not going to resurrect Madeline. And watching this entire conversation play out is, of course, Mr. Sinister, who explains that he keeps expecting the dynamics between Alex and Scott to get old, but it never does. And then Nanny comes upon him, declaring that Sinister's in an awful lot of trouble. But he explains that it doesn't matter what he's done. Because of him, mutants no longer fear death. And Nanny ends up asking him how many mutants has he resurrected, as Sinister describes all of the resurrected mutants as his children. And Sinister would also have to look up the numbers, but she explains that when she comes to punish Sinister, she wants to know how many orphans it will make. And that is where the issue ends. Which brings us to Excalibur number 12. Where we left off in Excalibur, we had learned a bit more about the immortal mutants known as the Externals. And apparently, a gem containing the power of the external Chandra had been discovered in a pantry in Opaluna Saturnine's Celestial Citadel in Otherworld. Also, Richter had seemingly gone through a gate, sort of, and yeah. And so we begin at the Eternal Caldera on Krakoa, with the Externals having come together just at the behest of Apocalypse. Adding that some of them even arrived with him. That he tells them about his theories. We also get a write-up on the Externals, as well as a list of at least 8 of them. So the write-up goes on to state that they have been believed they're believed by some to be a subspecies of or evolved offshoot of mutantdom But the external High Lords were perhaps an early tendency towards the eventual gifts that mutant kind would come to possess during the Pax Krakoa. Much has been supposed of their origin, limitations, and abilities, but it largely remains in the realm of theory. What is not theoretical is their long-term involvement in human politics, finance, and law. They've often been seen as a sort of mutant Illuminati. In addition to the abilities of very old, very powerful mutants, their additional external gifts included resurrection, explaining they can't be killed, but most possess, they can be killed. They possess rapid healing traits and all return, occasionally in a different form, if they meet true death. Mutants suspected to have external traits have indeed been tested with death, returning at times several years later. Back in the 90s, I was fairly certain that it was pretty much stated that they at least tried to claim that the only way to kill an external is to sever the 5 limbs, meaning both arms, both legs, and head. But apparently but the idea is that that's what makes it an external becomes dead like that, but apparently not. Then we have communion. They're always aware of one another, can communicate across great distances, and come together at will. They are known to possess a shared life force. When one kills another, their ancient energy is dispersed within the remaining externals, and additionally their life force can be contained within a gem, which has been shown to keep it out of the shared energetic loop. The 8 listed are Apocalypse, of course, Cruel, Nicodemus, Chandra, Selene, Gideon, Saul, and Absalom. So, back with Richter, he's trying to make his way out of the gate that he ended up in, and he crashes through in the internal crater. Basically, kind of sort of drawing battle lines. A lot of the externals don't like what Apocalypse has to say, and so Gideon and Selene end up joining Apocalypse. Saul takes the form of a giant dragon, but Richter is able to use the magma present to take care of the dragon. Absalom is left as the only survivor. And there are now crystal formations set by Chandra. This is why the Chandra feels different, like it's been empty for a while. And on Otherworld, well, yeah, the gem that Gambit picked up is Chandra. And she's speaking to him through it. Meanwhile, Captain Britain and Opaluna Saturnine are walking and talking with one another. And she brings her, and Saturnine brings Captain Britain into part of her citadel, where she has frozen in crystal 4 alternate Captain Britons. One that's Gambit, one that's sorry about that. But yeah, the alternate versions being one from Gambit, one from Richter, one from Rogue, one from Jubilee. So, something has, does appear to be an intruder. But back on Krakow, Apocalypse uses the crystal formations from the other three dead externals and uses them to communicate to the rest of the team in Otherworld. Chandra is trying to convince Gambit to, at least not give the gem to Apocalypse, but he does decide in the end that yeah, we're going to do just that, and so he tosses it through the gate, thus completing the gate. Giving Krakowans a gate between Opal Luna Saturnine's Celestial Citadel and Krakoa. And that is where the issue ends. Which then brings us to X-Men number 12. Now this is going to be one of those weird things where a tie-in issue actually the events of a crossover tie-in actually continue forward into the regular series. So where we left off in X-Men number 11, at least with Summoner, Rockslide, Loa, and Anole, Summoner and Rockslide were playing an Arakoan game. Seems to be going well. They're learning about each other's vulnerabilities. Like how Rockslide is an energy form started by rock. This is something that Anole and Loa are just now knowing, which is kind of weird, seeing how they've known him for years. And then another mutant comes to join them. Apocalypse, whom Summoner greets as grandfather. So, yeah, right off the bat, Summoner is Apocalypse's grandkid. But Apocalypse sends away the young X-Men. Rockslide's actually looking forward to seeing Summoner again. But the time has come for Apocalypse to talk with his grandson about Arakko. And so he tells them, a mutant's history of Arakko and the fallen world of Amenth. I'll start with what I know you know. The story was told to me. Akara, the one land of mutants. It was ancient before that word existed, but not yet old in the way they were old. The twilight sword of the enemy tore the world asunder, and what was one became two. From the chasm between them, from that dark world, the enemy poured into this world. Until, at great cost, the army of the enemy, along with Arakko itself, were pushed back through and the chasm was sealed shut. But like all stories old enough to grow into telling, it sometimes becomes difficult to separate fact from fiction or truth from lies. Some say that Apocalypse stayed behind to prevent the world from falling, to seal a breach and save what could be saved. After all, he was Apocalypse, the warrior god in blue, the great Reseeder, the first mutant of the second generation of mutantdom on Earth. There are others who tell stories of betrayal, of sacrificing his family to preserve himself and what little could be saved. Finally, there are whispers of something worse, judgment and slavery to fate, that Apocalypse was a prisoner to the whims of others. The only sure truth that survives in telling is this. What should never have been cleaved in two was separated forever. Husband from wife, parent from child, Arakko from Krakoa. From one trauma, the mutants of Arakko plunged themselves into the hell of the next one. What waited for them was not an army. No, for some it meant madness. For the rest, it was the wasteland of a world called Amenth, a black world, a fallen world. What they saw surprised them. A desolate nothing littered with the bodies of defeated enemies. All knew this handiwork, all recognized the black axe of the white sword and his 100 champions. He was nowhere to be seen. No trace of him remained, but his bloody hand had brought Araco time. And with that time, they worked wonders. It was their age of legends, a miracle mutantdom. Much of the work done by brave mutant alchemists and engineers still stands to this day. Not all, of course. Now only a few remain, but then there were 10 towers, and all the land between them belonged to the mutants of Araco. When the army of Amenth finally came, they were showed no mercy. And for thousands of years, the towers held, and the horde died at the border. Generations of mutants lived and died, never knowing defeat, and so he was born in glory 300 years ago. As a child, all he knew was the world inside of their walls. It was all any of them knew. It was a special kind of ignorance. Living in the only safe place in a world of violence and believing it must be the true way for all. We knew nothing of what it truly was. When my cribmate, the high mutant prophet Idol, went blind after seeing the fall of our great towers, people say Genesis laughed at him and threatened to remove his weak head from his weak shoulders. Genesis, the authority of Krakoa, the mother of horsemen, the wife of Apocalypse. And instead of striking Idol down, she raised an army. They were gone for 20 years. Every few months word would arrive of their conquests, and all of Araco would celebrate. They feasted on victory, it was their birthright, and Genesis fed them well. Later, they would learn that they had reached the Ivory Spire. It was the stronghold of the long-thought-lost White Sword, Purity. And their greatest healer, immortal, external, and each morning the White Sword resurrected his 100 champions and rode out to slaughter Amenthi demons, warring until the last soldier in his army died, only to begin again the next day. Genesis said that the death and resurrection cycle he lived had become his religion. She said he had become just as alien as the horde he raged against, and they mutants of Araco, and the mutants of Araco were the same to him. They tasted their first defeat at the hands of one of their own. They heard nothing for 6 years, and then, having escaped the untold and never spoken means, Genesis and the few mutants who survived returned to Araco. They returned only to find more defeat waiting for them. Iska, the traitor. Iska, the unbeaten. Her mutant power was that she could not lose. It was her power that forced her to join Amenth in the war against Akara. Understand? She had to. And she had to. They were going to win, and she cannot lose. Iska had been sent to invite Genesis to parley with Annihilation, the god of Amenth, at the seat of the Golden Helm's power, the capital city of Amenth. No one knows what words passed between them, just that Genesis accepted. It is said the great hall of Annihilation was full that day, that the full might of Amenth was witnessed for the first time. Amenthi demons and worse were waiting when Genesis arrived. I wonder, were they silent as Genesis approached Annihilation's throne? Did they scream in rage, or did they mock and jeer? All we know for sure is this. They battled to the death with the fate of Araco in the balance. They battled, and Genesis was found wanting, defeated, unfit, and buried. And burned with her was all hope for Araco. You see, their god is called Annihilation for a reason. For 100 years ago, the mad horde, the true might of Araco, or of Amenth, battered the walls of Araco. Mutants died, towers fell, but somehow they held. Mutants. Because there was still hope that somewhere out there, Apocalypse had raised a new mutant society, a greater one, and with it a monstrous and hope that somewhere out there you would raise a new mutant society, a greater one, and with it a mutant army that would save us all. They held out until they couldn't hold out any longer. A summoner was sent ahead to find Apocalypse. Others sought out a different kind of salvation, but he knows nothing of their success or failure. He only knows the last words of war, of farewell, and an under siege Araco. And finally, Summoner explains that they're out of time and Amos is on the march, and only Apocalypse can save them. And so, later, Apocalypse brings Summoner to the gate that he formed at the end of Excalibur. Coming with him are Banshee and Eunice the Untouchable. And Apocalypse declares that the price that was paid, he has done the work, and he has built the external gate. And so, going to Otherworld to cross it to get to Araco with Summoner will be Banshee, Eunice the Untouchable, and and of course, Summoner is asked to gather what information he can, including that if he is discovered that Araco has fallen, return quickly, and he enters Apocalypse to say, so you might save any survivors, rescue any enslaved. To which Apocalypse replies, that and have my long-awaited revenge. And Summoner explains that he can feel that this is the beginning of a new age. And the trio go off into the external gate, and that is where the issue ends. Which brings us to Giant Size X-Men Storm. Where we left off, Storm had apparently contracted a technovirus, slow-working technovirus that no one could figure out. And she and some of the other X-Men had gone to meet with Phantom X outside of the world. So we begin with a flashback to simply then. Jean explains what's going on with Storm to her. And then Monet shows up and thinks that maybe she does have an idea how to save Storm. At a later date, Monet and Cypher show up at a house. This is, not a nondescript one, but, they make their way in and confront the AIM scientist sitting on the couch. Still in his beekeeper outfit. They're, comments are made about the fact he sits around wearing it all the time, but he explains that he's a professional. He can't sit around in pajamas all day, can he? And he explains he's working for Phantom X. Which brings us to now. With Monet and Phantom X are negotiating terms until Storm basically says, hey, my life's hanging in the balance here. Can we hurry up and get on with this? So they go into the quintet goes into the world and start looking around. With Warlock having formed at one point around combat armor around Doug. But the fight rages on, and the technovirus seems to be spreading with Storm. But Ned, the AIM operative, is pretty sure he knows he saw just the thing. And they run into Phantom X talking with his brother over a bunch of dead AIM guys. Phantom X swears it's not as bad as it looks. But Ned gets everything ready. Storm goes into the machine and it removes the virus from her. Some of the creatures from within the world try and break into everything, but as Storm is healed from the virus, she breaks free, saves the day. Thanks, Monet. But it turns out that the technovirus mixed with the device that freed her of it. It's not mixing in the best of ways, so Ned hits it with a containment system. Phantom X once again asks if his brother was ready to leave, and, well, the brother says he's never going to leave, so Phantom X decides he's going to stay too. Turns out, Ned also wants to stay. This is a dream come true to him. And in fact, he wants the X-Men to take the money they were going to pay him and spend it. Don't give it to charity, but spend it. And as they leave, Cypher notes that the energy is sentient. And they have a brief conversation. And apparently it's hiding itself well, though. And that is where the issue ends. Which brings us to our final book for this video. Conan, Battle for the Serpent Crown, number 5? Yes. So where we left off, Ibis Champion, a billionaire and pawn of Mephisto, said, well, he had managed to take both the Serpent Crown and the Serpent Scepter. And was planning to sacrifice Conan and Nyla, his literal partner in crime, well, offer the two of them up to Mephisto, his patron of sorts. So the issue begins. Conan's in a mead hall. A woman around with her arms around him, a flag of mead in another hand. I think it's going well, but the ale has no bite, the meat no scent. And he comes to, chained up on the top of the Hotel Inferno with Nyla. And Nyla and Conan are trying to break free, but yeah, Champion shows up. Though it turns out that you gotta be careful with that Serpent Crown. It can do some damage to you after all. And a fight has broken out with Conan managing to knock the Serpent Crown off of Champion. Nyla then kicks it further out of his way. Conan and Champion duke it out when Mephisto intercedes from his cell within the hotel. He wants to speak to Conan, alone. Basically, got to say, hey, free me with the Serpent Crown and Serpent Scepter, and I'll send you back home with, a newly forged sword and a full coin purse. Yeah, though, but yeah. Conan's more reminded of a one-eyed old merchant in Sukhmet who tried to sell Conan a lame-legged camel. Only the merchant was a better liar than Mephisto. So he goes back. Champion is trying to Champion's trying to figure maybe he ought to take that thing off his head, but instead Conan jams the crown on there, and yeah, the power consumes him, killing him. Also, the Serpent Crown and Serpent Scepter are nowhere to be found. So, Nyla and Conan make their way downstairs, walking the strip. They're not as rich as they were hoping, but they do have enough for VIP servant turf at, I think it's supposed to be Caesar's. And so, that's exactly what they do, is go in and have dinner and drinks with some guests. And that is where the series concludes. That's not it for Conan's Ride. We've still got Savage Avengers, after all. This is still a thing that's running. But that's it for this video. As always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. I mentioned we'd be discussing next week's roundup at the end of this video. We're going to try, mind you, to get next week's video up on Wednesday. No promises, because it might not come to pass, but yeah, we're gonna try. If anything, we'll get one video up Wednesday, the other up on Thursday. We'll see what happens. Anyway, as I already said, that's it for now. As always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Links to my Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, and PayPal can be found in the description box down below. This is Rock and Roll Spock signing off, saying live long and rock hard.